So you keep trying to do JM presses, but no matter what, they never feel right. Your elbows are in pain, the triceps aren't being activated to the extent that you'd like, and in general, the movement pattern is all wacky. Look, I get it. As someone who's been doing the exercise on and off for many years now, I've concluded that I simply dislike the straight barbell version. It's difficult to standardize, and I always end up with overuse problems. So they might stay in my program for a little bit, but then I scrap them out for simple tricep extensions. That is until I discover the two variations I'm about to show you. I guarantee that if you're someone who dismissed the exercise before, the JM press was not for you, you weren't built for it, do these instead, and it'll become a staple. The first being the Smith machine JM press. Now, before you click off because you heard the word Smith machine, leave your bias aside and look at what the exercise entails. What does J.M. Blakely, the inventor of the exercise, always say? You want your forearm jamming into your bicep in a straight vertical line. This is the motion itself. Where at the bottom, you have the greatest torque at the elbow. So the resistance is coming here. That's your moment arm, right? Makes perfect sense, and it seems rather simple. Except for one problem. Barbells do not move in a straight line like that. So what you'll find is you end up flexing your wrist and moving the elbows all over the place, either sideways or forward and back. So when you look at the charts and the whiteboard where you see the resistance is straight up, it's not. And in fact, you are getting a great stressing effect in the bottom, in the lengthened position, right? But if you try pressing out that low, which is what you're supposed to do, this is not a skull crusher. It's a very odd strength curve. And the reason is that you have to press in front of the body. It's not possible to press backwards while simultaneously being in a straight line, at least with free weights. The consequence of that being, and keep in mind, if you press backwards, you're gonna hit the rack, okay? So as you're pressing forward, the forearm is also tilting forward, therefore becoming more aligned with your wrist, and the direction of resistance going straight through it, aka lowering the moment arm, which isn't a huge deal. It's only some centimeters, but still, it could be better. And then the other issue is the size of your arms. Notice that those who love JM presses the most are all jacked out of their minds to the point that we're never gonna look like them. They have 19-inch arms at a bare minimum. Or in general, they just have so much muscle. Their forearms, biceps, and triceps, they're so large that when they do this lowering phase, they stop here, bro. Where a guy like me, even with 17s, like, basically, if you're skinny, your arm is gonna be all the way back like this. So it's gonna be even harder on your elbow joints in the bottom. It's gonna be overly stressing the lengthened position. I mean, it's good to hit it, but it's a thing as too much, right? It's like doing a camber bar bench with like a 10-inch deficit or something, you know? Like, you want to get low enough, but not to the point where you're stretching yourself out like a contortionist, right? Well, it's the same thing with the JM press. And there is that sweet spot, which is unfortunately reserved for the bigger guys. So that also makes it harder to stabilize the movement and keep that vertical freaking alignment that I was telling you about. Whereas the Smith machine JM press instantly solves all these problems. It doesn't even matter if you try to cheat it. You can't roll yourself and turn it more into a close grip bench because there's a ratio between the two, right? The Smith version is balanced and it perfectly calibrates for all individuals. Like, even with the increased range of motion, because we can't do anything about that. Doesn't change the fact that as you're pressing through, the moment arms are consistent. It's less drastic, whereas the bigger guy, when he uses the straight bar, it might look more straight. But if you're skinnier, it won't. So with this, yeah, it's still going to be harder in the length position just because of the size of your arm, unless you manually do partials, which could be an option. Doesn't change the fact that the movement pattern will be identical. It's standardized, just that we're getting more range of motion in the bottom. That's it. But in terms of the JM press itself, you can know with high degree of confidence that you're doing it correctly, or as correctly as possible. And then the next advantage, which I can't recommend enough, is including band tension. With the Smith machine, this is insanely stable. Whereas the barbell version, not only do the bands move, which can change your form a bit, they also create instability. But on the Smith, it doesn't change the motion in any kind of way. Zero. You can put 300 pounds of band tension, the exercise is going to look exactly the same. I cannot say the same for the straight barbell. So the only thing you're doing is changing the strength curve, making it harder towards the lockout, which actually is a good thing for JM presses because, as I pointed out earlier, they're very length and bias. And if you're someone who has those skinnier arms or you're doing a lot of range of motion, this might be even better for you. And in general, if you want to feel your triceps to the highest degree possible, actually do a full extension of the arm, as your forearm naturally becomes more vertical, the band tension will solve that. Also, it's a good variation to mix in because you can't just do one version year round. That's how you develop overuse injuries unless you swap it out for extensions and you just go back and forth like that, By adding in band tension, it gives us the options of milking JM presses and potentially lowering joint stress. So not only are the contractions superior for the average person, I'll say intermediate lifters will especially love this. It's also super stable, which is very interesting. It almost feels like a machine that was custom made for building bigger triceps. Amazing sensations. This should be your go-to. And if I trained at a gym majority of times, it'd be my number one for sure. Even more so than the next variation, which I want to talk about right now, being the safety squat bar JM press. You see right behind me? The handles are off. Unscrew the handles and keep the camber in a neutral position such that it's not inverted pointing up. Then attempt to do a normal JM press. I want to point out that this doesn't contradict anything I mentioned previously because the SSB moves with you. When your arms are fully locked out, the handles are vertical. And as you lower, first of all, the handles will touch your body. You bring it back a bit, and now they become equivalent to your forearms. So you got this motion right here. This is not only far more stable because the padding is creating somewhat of a holding sensation, which makes it easier to get the bar moving straight up and down. And then as you're going lower, the camber is rotating towards the bottom of your torso. In other words, that provides more stability in itself, while at the same time deloading the bottom ever so slightly. Keep in mind, it's only a very small amount, right? So out of all the free weight variations you could do, this is the easiest on your elbows. But it's still way more length and bias than a traditional skull crusher. And then to top things off, because there's tactile feedback, this allows you to master form in a way that's perfect for your anthropometry. Because if in the bottom position, the padding is hitting your face or your nose area, it means you're doing a partial. It's bad form. Whereas if it's too low, you're not even getting close to being up here, then it's too much of a close grip bench press. So you're rolling yourself forward, making the exercise easier than it needs to be. So you'll find what that balance spot is, which it's going to look different for everybody. But what's cool is that it's not you just trying to guess where your hands are in space in relation to the barbell, trying to get everything perfect. Like you're basing this off where the SSB is on your body. Kind of like doing a box squat or a floor press. You can feel where your body is in space. I hope this is not confusing, but to simplify things, if you're someone who always had trouble learning the JM press, the SSB will now become your best teacher. It's like JM Blakely standing right in front of you, instructing you what to do. You're self-taught, and it's no longer cookie cutter. Because if you look at the barbell version, the form can vary massively. Some guys, it doesn't even look like the skull crusher portion is present, or if it is there, it's very minor. Here, you'll know if you're cheating yourself. So for that reason alone, it's worth it from an accountability standpoint. So look, you can either lower the bar, and once the handles touch your body, you bring it back, or you bring it back at the same time. Either way, you're going to end up in a similar spot. And it's going to be so much easier on your wrists because the bar is not rolling in your hands. So stability is enhanced, thus increasing triceps motor unit recruitment. You'll know that you're producing maximum force in the strictest way possible. That's a big deal. And for anyone who trains at a home gym, there's nothing that will compare to this in terms of overload and long-term potential. Now, in terms of accommodating resistance, I especially like the reverse bands because As I point out earlier, these are easier on your elbows because of the camber. With the reverse bands, you're only doubling down on that process. So even though you could use chains and bands double from the bottom, I find if your elbows are sensitive, let's say you have hypermobility like me, or in general, you're someone who was never able to do JM presses for a long period of time, maybe start with the reverse band version first to really build that tendon strength and overall resiliency, and then you can start gradually removing them or just interchange. Because another advantage with the reverse bands is that yes, you can go heavier, and technically that is equated in the bottom when you put more plates on to match overall load, right? Because you're kind of getting that spotter effect. But the other thing is, as you get closer to failure, you're gonna have more grindy repetitions. That could be good in making the top harder, believe it or not, which is more relevant on JM presses because for full elbow extension at the end of the pressing part, the moment arms are basically not much. Similar to when you do chest flies. The squeeze at the top is insignificant. And of course, I want you to do full range of motion, not only for the best carryover to your presses, but just for joint integrity and doing the movement pattern correctly. You don't want to be doing partial lockouts, in my opinion, even though that could work. So the reverse band allows for more straining when you're using low reps in reserve. You want to push your triceps to the limit, and you want to do so in a joint-friendly way. Reverse bands is how you're going to do that. But like I said, the regular way works too. I like both. So that's it, guys. There's not much else to say about the JM press. It's a simple exercise, and by picking one of these variations, I know you'll be able to stick to it long term. So let me know how you enjoy the Smith or SSB style, and I'll see you in the next video.